had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me. Good afternoon, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday, and you know as well as I do that means it's time for another episode of Cello Chat. I'm super excited this week to have on the program Christine Kralik. Dr. Kralik, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Well, I'm glad to have you on the program.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So let's just get started with just what's your story with the cello in the first place, and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I started music when I was 5 years old, and it was piano. That's pretty normal for parents to put their kids in piano lessons. And then a lot of kids learn this way. There was an orchestra program in my elementary school, and my parents wanted me to do that as well, but they wanted me to do violin. And I wasn't as, happy about that. And we went to a music shop to maybe go get the violin. And I walked off by myself, and there was a cello in the back corner. I didn't know what it was, but I saw it and I was like, that's what I'm supposed to play. Like, I just felt like that's it. And I ran back to mom and dad and was like, I'm going to play this instrument. And they were like, it's so big. Are you sure you want to do that? But I insisted, and we ended up renting one, and the rest is history. I never had to be asked to practice. I loved it,
Nice.
just knew that's what I wanted to do. So that was
Excellent.
my beginning. And to this point, I now teach at Middle Tennessee State University. I taught at the University of Mississippi before here, and Angelo State University before that. I did my doctorate at Texas Tech University, a master's at Cleveland Institute of Music, and my undergrad at the University of Utah.
All right. And your teachers at each of those places? I know Jeffrey taught at Texas Tech at the time, still does.
Yes, Jeff Lastrapes. And then I studied with Richard Weiss at Cleveland Institute, and then Pegsoon Whang at the University of Utah.
Excellent, excellent. All right. And you play both cello and bass. Not all cellists do. How did that come about?
So honestly, I feel like my teacher, Jeff Lastrapes, during my doctorate was very smart. And he was like, if you want a job at a university, this is helpful. Like, it's helpful to be able to say you do this. And so he pushed me to take lessons during my doctorate degree. And I did. I studied with the bass professor for a little bit and learned how to do it. And honestly, if you want to get into it, it's not that hard. It comes pretty quickly. If you already have a bass understanding in cello, then going to the double bass is pretty feasible. But really, that's why I did it, is because he's like, this is a good idea if you want to be looked at for a position somewhere.
Definitely, definitely. And in fact, that makes a good segue. I wanted to ask you, it's been a while since I've had somebody on the program who does teach both cello and bass. What do you consider to be some of the, what should I say, opportunities for cross-pollination, things that you transfer from bass to cello and vice versa?
I guess like what comes to mind is just some of the technique stuff. Honestly, like, you play on the bass for a little bit and you go back to cello and things feel easier. And just because it takes so much effort to get a good sound out of the bass, vibrato is a much wider thing on the bass. And so when you go to cello, it feels like nice. It's a good experience, and it's not as hard. I think playing the double bass is really difficult. It requires a lot more effort and force. There's nothing wrong with that, but it just does. And a lot more bow weight and pressure, and a lot more effort to get a good sound out because you're dealing with such a large instrument. And so when you go to the cello, you're like, oh my gosh, I can relax. I don't need to push as hard. I don't need to maybe put as much effort in. And so in a way, I think it makes you more aware of how your body feels and what you experience and what you don't want to feel. Maybe when you go to the bass, you're like, okay, maybe I'm pushing too hard. How can I work with this and make it easier on myself? So I think it's a good encompassing thing to be more aware of what you're doing on both instruments.
Yeah, yeah. Can I a little bit more specifics? What do you think about, because there's a tendency sometimes among cellists to pivot instead of doing an extension. So kind of, how do you feel about the pluses and minuses of the technique of pivoting on a bass as it applies to cello?
Right. I feel like the pivoting thing can be helpful when you have to go a long distance, right? I don't know if this is quite what you're getting at, but like intonation, is always important. No matter what instrument you're playing, you're always trying to aim for having perfect pitch, really good intonation. And so pivoting or shifting, I think knowing and being comfortable doing both is helpful no matter what.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah. And then two other things that strike me about the comparison between cello and bass, I wonder if they do you as well. One of them is standing to play the bass. And there's a degree to which sometimes with cellists, just sitting down in that chair and it just as though it cuts us off from our lower half entirely. And just the issue of balance, having to balance the bass with yourself and be aware of the gravity on your whole body, I think is good for a cello player, that perspective. Would you agree?
I do agree. And I did bass sitting down and standing, and so I've done it both ways, and like I can see benefits to both. But I think, yeah, again, it makes you more versatile and able to like feel a different thing and figure out how to play in that position, and it's super helpful. And yeah, normally as cellists we don't stand, but can try to think about how you can move with your lower body, even though you're seated. How do you like get some fluidity and physical motion? And it helps your
Definitely.
playing to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And then I suppose I said two things, but I guess there were three total. On the bass, how you shift so often, and such large distances in many cases that if when encountering a cellist that is at all kind of reluctant to release the thumb and really shift with the entire arm for those large shifts. I mean, obviously small shifts on the cello can be a bit of another thing, but I find that can be a liberating experience for a cellist to realize, just you got to get there now, just move the hand. It's not that big of a deal.
Right. And bass students, they learn how to do that like immediately. They can't play notes if they don't move. And so, yeah, I wish we could encourage that too more on cello. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And then finally, German bass bow hold. German bow is one of those things where just how to say it. It's like when people have only done French bow hold and they've kind of put their brain around, this is my bow hold. Oh, and I'm supposed to do something on the string. You know what I mean? And it becomes about the bow hold. Whereas to spend a little bit of time with the German bow hold, for some students, can make them more aware of, no, 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 no. It's about the contact between the bow hair and the string. Regardless of what's going on here, it's not about this, it's about this. And then when you go back to the French bow hold, it makes it more like that bow hold itself is in the middle of the process. I don't know. What have you had success with the German bow along those lines?
Yeah, I really liked when I first was learning the German bow hold how freeing it is. And like my teacher at the time was like, you can rotate your whole hand like with the German bow hold. You can't do that with the French one. Like the whole arm and wrist and everything can move, because you're holding it in a way that gives a lot more motion. And so it's like, yes, what you're talking about, can you transfer that same relaxed, ease to the French hold? Again, that's super helpful. And I liked how you said it is more about the sound and the contact point and what you're doing with the bow and not so much the hand. I had Jeff Lastrapes when I was studying with him. He was like, we have thousands of different bow holds. My hand is always doing different things depending on what I'm trying to do. So
right. That's a very good point too, and a very good way to think about it. Yeah, Jeff is very good. So another thing I'm dying to ask you about is in among your presentations is not only, if I remember correctly, must have been a presented paper for ASTA on the topic, but also a publication on the, not only, I think it was both, weren't you? You were talking both about kind of how to go about approaching recording yourself, and then also how recording yourself can be an integral part of how you practice.
yes.
Would you talk about that some?
Yeah. So that paper, it was a paper first, and
Okay.
then I did some sort of presentation on it afterwards.
Ah,
And it came about really when and I hate having to bring this up, but COVID, like we're kind of over it, I feel like. But when COVID happened, and as a teacher, I'm sure you had to do this, a lot of Zoom lessons and a lot of like one-on-one over a virtual format, which was not great. And I would ask students, can you send me a recording um, of a whole performance? It was a little easier to do that than have them play the whole thing over Zoom.
yeah.
And I'd get these recordings back, and they were okay. They weren't like great. And I was like, well, did you listen back to this? Like, you just sent me something you made. And the answer was like, no, not really. And so it got me thinking more about how we can use the recording device to be a teacher for ourselves, really, because it's the most honest representation of what we sound like in the moment. And so the paper wasn't written with COVID in mind, but it just was sort of like, how can we use a recording device to help us become better players and better teachers of ourselves? And, I thought about my own opportunities when I've had to record for things and how I've had to progress to be more comfortable to do it and get better at it. And it's like, how cool would it be if we could be better at this sooner than later? And so making that article was about becoming more comfortable using it, but also encouraging your students to listen to themselves and then record again with the purpose in mind that they can fix whatever issues they're hearing. And so I meant it to be a positive way to be like, yeah, maybe we're not meeting in person, but you can still glean a lot from what you're doing just based on a recording device. And then you should continue doing that, now. And I also like recorded my cello lessons when I was growing up and going through school. That was always really helpful. The paper didn't focus on that too much, but I did mention it. It's like, this is a great tool to encourage your own learning and remembering back what people have asked you to do or work on. And if you can get over the fear of listening to yourself, that is, you'll just find that I think you have a lot of power to grow even more than maybe you thought you could.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It just seems like year after year, it's just um, it's a part of being a human for a lot of people to be loath to record themselves and listen back to it. Like their first instinct is just to use that as an excuse to beat themselves up, just to hear all the negative things. But when you do it over a sustained period of time, you go, oh, now that's a lot better. Oh, I cleaned up that passage quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and we just learn so much from listening to recordings of ourselves. We can be so much more objective that it is a missed opportunity for the people who shy away from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember one quote I included, but Suzuki would he talked about like encouraging his young students to record themselves on cassette tapes. And they did it so often, they'd go back and they'd hear themselves, and they were young, but they'd be like, Mom, that's me playing. Like they'd be excited about it. So it's like, can you
Yeah.
imagine us being excited about, you just said, progressing and getting better?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Flip it. That's great. All right, thoughts on motivating students when students need help for whatever reason, just putting in the effort that it takes to get from here to there. What are some of your favorite approaches to that?
Um, I feel like the student needs to have a desire themselves that they really want to be better and to be good. Otherwise, there's no point and it's not going to happen. So I find that it's helpful to talk about what are your goals and what are you wanting to do and what do you want to get better at. And then if they're like, well, I want to get into a master's program or I want to audition for this, then you be honest and you're like, this is what it will take to do those things. But I try to be really encouraging and positive through all that. And I also feel like they see my enthusiasm and love of playing the instrument and it's catching. They want to have that same enjoyment too from the art. And so I feel like I don't have to beg always to be like, can you practice? Or, why are you doing this? I think they see from your example and other cellists and musicians how amazing it is to be able to create and play beautiful music. And so I think that alone inspires just their own drive. But I try to encourage them to go for opportunities. And if we often get rejected for things, it's not always a yes for things. And it's like, don't let that discourage you. Like, keep going. You'll only get better from here. Don't let that stop you. And it's the people that stop that I think, I don't know, just that's so sad. And so it's like, don't fall into that rut where you don't continue. And it makes you stronger if you can keep pushing through and trying for other things, and you'll get yeses, you'll get those opportunities that you're looking for. So I think encouraging students is just, being honest about it, but also being cheering them on basically, and helping be an example of what they could reach and could get to.
Nice. Now there is an interesting, I think, kind of the chicken and egg loop as far as even things like motivation, in that the more joy you show in playing the instrument, then the more you see that often reflected in the students. And I remember even from your bio, you talk about the joy you have in teaching. Mm-hmm. So, part of that may also be that you go into teaching seeing all those positives, and you bring the energy and they mimic it, you know what I mean, which in and of itself is fun and rewarding. But I just wonder if you want to talk any more about what it is that you find so joyful about teaching, especially for some of the young future teachers watching this.
Right. For me, I find a lot of joy in seeing a student who maybe couldn't previously do something, or they thought they couldn't do something, and then they get better and stronger, and they go and play a jury, or they go and play an audition, and they succeed at it. And they're like, that was, that felt so good. That was fantastic. I want to do it more. I want to perform more. I've had students come to me and be like, maybe they weren't majors actually, and then they're like, I've seen you play and I've played and performed and I love it so much, I'm going to change my degree. I'm like, that's fantastic. Like, just that's so rewarding for you as the educator to see it being loved by them, and that they want to pursue it and continue creating music, and that you had some small influence and hand in that is amazing.
It really is, right, at all levels. Now, okay, so that makes me think of another thing as far as your own background and current position has you playing a lot of orchestral music and chamber music and solo music. So this could be, maybe take this question either way in terms of how each one of those things, how you incorporate it proactively in your teaching, what you learn from those different types of playing, or how you go about kind of trying to take the best of each of those worlds in your teaching to steer a student towards either a type of repertoire that's going to excite them or what have you.
Right. I think as an overall answer, I think everything that I get to do influences my students, and it makes them better because they see and hear about what I'm doing, and I'm the one that experienced it, right? And so I get to tell them about it, and I get to tell them how I did it and what I worked on and what I played and how hard it was or not hard or whatever my experience was. And that's also a huge, I think, motivational thing for them too. And it's exciting for them to be like, oh, you got to record for so-and-so, or you got to go play for this group, or you got to go perform chamber music here. And all of that's, it's exciting to me, but it's exciting to the students also, because they see that I'm busy and I'm active and I'm doing lots of things. I think that's important too, as a teacher and professor, that the students see that you are creating music, that you're doing what you're here to teach, and that you're actually a cellist, right?
Yeah. And the cello also has such different hats to wear, roles to play, being able to know when you're the accompaniment role and what that means and how to play that, versus when you're kind of a secondary role. Sometimes we're in there with the violas on a inner part or a counter melody, and then other times you take the lead as the soloist, and we go back and forth very rapidly, don't we?
Yes. So you have to learn how to communicate and be sensitive, but also confident. And then also know when to be confident, but be less, so you can support someone else. And so it's a lot of awareness and musical language, and but that's such a wonderful thing to study. And to me, you get better at those things with the more you play and the more that you do and the more that you experience. And so it all helps you. I often encourage my students, hey, if someone asks you to play in a recital, like I would tell them yes, like say yes, you'll do it, because whatever music they're asking you to do, it's usually super helpful to you more than any degree, and I don't mean to put down a degree, but just like real playing and real opportunity to play for something teaches you more than a class maybe is going to teach you. But
that's very true. I think experience is its best teacher, especially if you are paying attention, that you can't let it go by passively. You've got to be aware and focused. All right. Well, so you have some recordings, professional recordings yourself out there, and I'm sure lots more concerts coming up. What's in the works for 2024?
yeah, so I was gonna show real fast, like I just had an album released.
Nice.
And it's called Impassioned Cello, and it's works for cello and piano. And I played Mendelssohn Sonata and work by Sibelius, Melancholia, and then Grieg Sonata. And it's on all the platforms now, so you can go find it and stream it and listen to it. Along with the recording, I'm planning to do another recording in the summertime, more works for cello and piano. So I'm excited about that.
Right.
Yeah, and I have lots of orchestra gigs, like I'm playing all the time for different things like that. This weekend I'm playing with I have a trio I play in called the RKP Trio, and it's clarinet, cello, and piano. And so we're doing Brahms this weekend, and a work by Gwyneth Walker called the Craftsbury Trio, which is originally for violin and cello and piano, but she also made a version for clarinet. And so we go and play that, and it's a great piece if you've not heard it before. And we're also playing a piece by Stephanie Ann Boyd that was also for violin, cello, and piano. And we kind of approached her, and she's like, yeah, I'll make it for clarinet. So it's been cool to be playing with this group and see the different works that we've been able to find and play. Along with that, I'm busy this semester playing for various other projects locally and different groups I play in. And so I stay busy, but I enjoy it.
Terrific. Yeah, I love blending with the clarinet. The timbre in its kind of three main registers is such a different color, and it's fun finding that on the cello and blending with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some great repertoire for it as well. Well, that's super. So what repertoire is on the recording session for this summer?
So I'm planning to do the Poulenc Cello Sonata.
Oh, wow, that one's not easy.
No, it's a great piece though.
It is.
Great piece. Prokofiev Cello Sonata.
Yeah,
and
good.
then two more modern works by Canadian composers. So should be fun.
All right, excellent. Yeah, that Poulenc, I mean, it's just this passages where it's almost as though he wanted to see how often he could make you
jump
shift
around
from the higher.
Yeah.
Like
how quickly you could
grasshopper.
Do it. Yeah. So it's a workout, but it's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, it really is. Very creative. Yeah, very French through and through. I do love it. You're right. Well, best of luck with that. I look forward to hearing that CD as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Whitcomb.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kralik. It's been great visiting with you, and to all of you out there about to practice all weekend long, best of luck with that. I know you're highly inspired to do so. And we'll see you this time next Friday. Take care.
You had me at Cello.